It helps you become better with your service deliveries. But the question that always came back was, is ITIL only about service delivery? Or when people would hear about ITIL, they would always talk about things like problem management, change management, incident management. It kind of, the focus of ITIL was very gravitated towards, I would say, help desk and related functions to people who are not aware of the framework. So the question that came back was that, is ITIL only focused on certain areas in terms of service delivery of an organization, or how is it applicable? And then comes out ITIL4, where they just took the bull with the horns, and they're like, okay, when we talk about ITIL and its applicability, it applies to every segment of the organization. I like the holistic view and the way they have kind of come out with the service value system, where they talk about how your activities, whether you are an individual or you are a team of people, and how the goals of the organization are so much aligned with the goals of an individual. I mean, you cannot have two parties where I, as an individual in an organization, is doing one thing and the organization decides to do something else. Now, we are not somewhere in sync. And the best part I like about this very thought is that how all our contributions as individuals, how it impacts us as an individual, our teams, our units, our departments, and the whole organization. So I feel that with ITIL4, that relevance has just grown. It has, I mean, there's no quantifier I can put there, but it has grown manifold. And it's more relatable to people who are now just getting introduced into ITIL as a framework. Today, I'm going to talk about employability trends. And now these are some of the trends that I've come across in the last several months. They hold the way they held the ground a few months ago, even though these numbers may not be picked up like as of today, but they kind of give you an understanding of how the industry really looks at ITIL4, and why, if you have not already got certified, or if your organization has not got certified or doesn't have ITIL4 certified professionals, why you should look into that. What I do before I get started, so I am the program director of the Graduate Business Analytics program at the University of Texas at Dallas. Right here in the heart of the Dallas-Fort Worth area is where we are located. I'm also a professor in the School of Management at the University of Texas at Dallas. But on top of it, I'm responsible for a lot of corporate engagements, industry engagements, and training programs. And one of the training programs that we do have at the university is around ITIL, which is my personal favorite, just because of the immense benefits that I've seen people receive being certified, or even organizations using ITIL as a framework in terms of productivity, revenues, profits, etc. Now, to our audience who might already be familiar with ITIL4, ITIL3, V3, and now are thinking about V4. But I'll take a couple seconds and just talk about what exactly this ITIL is. I mean, we may have people in the audience who have no clue about ITIL. Think of ITIL as a framework. It's not a mandate, it's not a diktat, it's a framework. For example, if our question is, how do I make my incident management practice more robust? Well, there are some guidelines that are given out. Do you have to follow them word by word? Not really, because it gives you the flexibility to incorporate your own flavors into the way you deliver ITIL. But ITIL gives you a solid framework. It's like, it's a book of knowledge. It helps you understand how these best practices work and how they are interconnected into one another. So tomorrow,
Gaurav, you know what? It's a really good point. We, since you and I both came slamming into this, let me launch a poll real quick. You can keep talking, but the poll is, let's see, let's just learn a little bit about who we have here with us today. So I just gave the option of certified in Foundation V3, Foundation 4, Advanced certified in V3, Advanced in 4, or other. Please chat in, because that was a little bit assumptive to think that everyone on the call was certified. So Gaurav, we've got folks. Yeah.
My screen may not be there, right? Are you able to still see my screen?
No, I do think that the poll covered it over. And we've got 66% voted, 69% now. So I'm going to be shutting it down in just a second. Here we go. And let me close this and let me share these results for you. So we have, wow, 44% are certified in ITIL4 Foundation. Next, a tie, 28% V3 Foundation, and then 28% of certified in ITIL4. And then anyone who picked other, if you want to just chat in what that is for you, we'll Gaurav and I will both be able to see that. And let me go ahead and close this down and let you keep going. I'm sorry I didn't think to do that at the very start.
No problem, no problem. Okay, you can still see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So then we have a good number of people who are even certified in ITIL v4, and just to do a quick recap of what that difference is. There are different processes. So just think about, there are processes, there are recommendations, there are different kind of value streams and stuff that you'll find in ITIL. And I'm just going from a perspective of somebody who doesn't understand ITIL. But then to the ones who are already aware of it, ITIL v3 had 26 different processes that was replaced by 34 practices. Some of those practices are things like knowledge management, problem management, change management, help desk. It is split into 3 different containers, these 34 practices. And again, it's not that these 26 processes that were there in v3 and these 34 that are in v4 are very different. It's a lot of it is repackaging it. Why repackaging? Because we just need to kind of keep up with the changing trends that the industry has seen, to just make sure that whatever we are recommending as a framework is relevant. You had the service life cycle in v3, and now in v4 you have the service value system. It talked about continual service improvement, which became continual improvement, one of the same things. In a way, same, but in a way different as well, because when you talk about service improvement, you're very focused on services, but then there's a huge push on how do you holistically look at the entire organization and its deliveries. So that's where ITIL v4 is there. And there are 2 terms that they use extensively. I mean, it doesn't matter what version we are talking about, but value and continuous improvement, because that's the bedrock for ITIL in terms of growth for an organization or individual. There were 9 guiding principles in v3 and came down to 7 of them in v4. The 4 P's and the 4 dimensions, automation, support. And the biggest thing that I felt was a differentiator, maybe not the biggest, but I would say a very important one was, see, we always talk about value creation, but then the focus of v4 is more around value co-creation, because value cannot be just created from one end and everybody else is a recipient. When you talk about a consumer and a service provider, you still talk about how both these parties to each other provide value. You are providing services to your consumers, but if the consumers are not giving you the right feedback in a timely fashion, then they are not probably keeping their end of the bargain. And how both of them can together coexist in a symbiotic relationship to co-create that value is what the focus of v4 is. Now, some hard data that we received, we use a particular channel to get this kind of data, and it's called Burning Glass. I would recommend, in case your organization wants to look at the trends, the data around the different labor statistics that we have in the country, around the world, wherever it is. But this is a very top quality data source to figure out how the labor market is moving. And I'm just talking about the United States right now, but in the last about 12 months or so, there have been about 120,000 jobs that they looked at, with the median being about $89,000 for those jobs. And by the way, these jobs that I'm talking about somewhere listed ITIL as a requirement. These are not all the jobs, but these are ITIL related jobs, or where ITIL was one of the requirements. Then again, if I kind of drill it down by education level, so how that also plays a role, and where the needed high school training versus associate's degree versus maybe a bachelor's degree, you can see the difference, the different quartiles here that we're looking at. If you have a bachelor's degree, it goes anywhere from 77,000 to 110K, with the average being about $94,000. And these are jobs that required ITIL plus a bachelor's degree. Similarly with the associate's degree, and then the high school or vocational training. Now you might sometimes feel that, shouldn't the associate's degree have a little more in terms of the average salaries? Well, you have to keep in mind a lot of the jobs out there, even though they require specialized know-how and specialized skill sets, might still want to keep their minimum requirements as high school or vocational training. So that's where that little skewness in the data is. By experience, if we, again, all these numbers that I'm showing are around ITIL related jobs or jobs that require ITIL. So, for no experience to about 2 years of experience, the average being $57,000 with a high of almost 80K, going all the way to 9+ years of experience where the average is $107,000 with the high of 121K. And these are all these 120,000 jobs that are posted in the last about 12 months. Looking at years of experience, you can see the majority, the biggest bracket of about 66% people are between 3 to 8 years. And that's the kind of experience that companies are looking for. One thing that I like about this number is the fact that at a very early point in your career, some of these jobs expect you to know about ITIL. And that's the reason why a lot of students in universities or colleges that are going and getting their, or even sometimes high schools, they are trying to get ITIL certified to just know about what ITIL is and what this framework really can do. Because most of these students, within a couple of years of them starting their jobs or getting their degrees, land a job that is around service delivery. So what organizations have started seeing is that if somebody, even if they don't have experience, but they have an understanding of the framework of how things like ITIL work, they bring in more value to their companies. Why? Because if you know of the best practices to do your job, then there's a likelihood that you will be less susceptible, or the work that you do is less susceptible to errors, to risks. And by being ITIL certified and you being more cautious about what you're doing in terms of adding value, in terms of making sure that the you're not doing anything which can cause loss of revenue, or you're not doing something which is high risk, or even if it is high risk, the risks are mitigated in some sound fashion. All that is required by companies, and what they do is they reward you by a higher pay. So on an average, we've seen about $5,000 to $10,000 more for a person who's ITIL certified as opposed to somebody who's not. Because even though you got certified, whatever you put in to get certified, you over a period of time are saving hundreds of thousands of dollars by just doing things differently, by doing things which are not putting the company out in the open, and you manage the risks well for the company. Looking at the educational level, you can see that most of the jobs somewhere wanted a bachelor's degree. Most of these jobs that were posted in the last 12 months. Some of the the top occupations that are requiring certifications now, apart from getting ITIL certified, you might be in a different role. So if you are a computer support specialist, and all of these are bachelor's level jobs: software developer, project manager, systems administrator, network engineer, cybersecurity analyst, systems analyst, business analyst, program manager. Now, one of the things that you have to remember is, in most of the organizations, your certification, your experience is one thing, but even your degree is something that kind of factors into how much you make. And that might not be true for all the organizations, but what I'm quoting here is the general trend, the way they look at things. For that matter, if you, let's say, were on the course of getting, let's say, your bachelor's degree, and you were left with a few credits and you never completed it, a lot of universities right now have programs through which they take in those credits and they let you finish your degree. So if you are somewhere, anywhere on your degree and you still want to complete it, I would strongly recommend to do that, because that also kind of can help you bump your ability to get promotions and at the same time a higher pay. Now, in the hardware and the infrastructure section, about 132,000 jobs are posted. Out of that, 120K out of the 132K jobs wanted ITIL certification. And it's foundation mostly that they go for. They just list ITIL most of the time, but a foundation certificate is good for them. But some of them might demand, the next levels, like, be an ITIL expert or have the intermediate certificate or the master certificate. Now, of course, those numbers, when they ask for very specialized certifications, will always be lower than the general certification. But the good thing is, even if you are ITIL foundation certified, that is acceptable in most of the places that we look at. But in case you are kind of curious as to what these hardware and infrastructure related jobs would ask for, most of them revolve around ITIL, because they know that if you are ITIL certified, then you pretty much are doing things the way they are expected. Some of the top occupations that we have seen, and I just wanted to extend a little bit on this data, that some of the top jobs that have been posted around have been, of course, software development, software engineer are the top jobs that will always be the number one in the industry. But the network engineer, systems engineer, help desk technician, IT project manager, a lot of these jobs after software developer, I'm not saying that software developers don't need ITIL. I think really anybody who's touching a computer requires ITIL. That's my take on it. But or is working in an organization. Doesn't matter how digitized you are, ITIL is a great way to take care of things. But most of these jobs that you look at right now, the projected growth rate is phenomenal. And if you can see, most of them are around 10%. 10% means that in 10 years of time, whatever number we are looking at right now will be doubled. Some of them are going at the rate of 30%, which means in 3 years they will double. So you're seeing 353,000 jobs right now. We're looking at about 700K in the next 3 years when it comes to software engineers. And even though the number of jobs that really require certifications might not seem huge right now, but it still is a growing number. It is a growing number. Why? Because, see, certifications is a way for organizations to vet what you know. They understand what you know. They kind of use that as a means of not spending too much time on evaluating you, but they go with those certifications, and they know that if you have a certain certification, then you definitely are a much suited resource for them. Now, call it time crunch or the inability to spend too much time on vetting a candidate, but certifications have always helped in those scenarios, and that's why they try to kind of filter out the applicants just by adding these certifications sometimes, because they know that unless you have those certifications, you really cannot do the job that they expect you to do. And ITIL really features a lot of times. The top skills, co-occurring skills, and in that also you see ITIL coming out in 117,000 of these postings. And this is all the last 12 months, 12 to 14 months that we are looking at right now. So an enormous amount of need for ITIL related resources. Now, the top industries that are looking for ITIL related careers, professional, scientific, technical services, of course, we would expect them to need ITIL, but manufacturing, that's the piece that doesn't baffle me, but it's a great number to share there, that even industries like manufacturing, finance and insurance, healthcare, public administration, educational services, administrative support, waste management, they are looking for ITIL trained resources, which means that the scope of jobs that are out there that require ITIL is increasing, and is increasing at a rate that tomorrow, irrespective of which industry you go into, there might be a need for an ITIL trained resource. In a few minutes, I'm going to share a statement, a fact with you that'll tell you why I'm kind of insisting on the fact that ITIL certifications are really important out there. Top locations for these jobs, these 120, 130K jobs that I showed you, of course, Texas and California are kind of hot, but in a nutshell, if you look at this, all over the US, you need ITIL skills. So whichever state you are in, there are jobs that require know-how of ITIL. Some of the top ones. So you will see about 12,000, 11,500 postings in Texas, followed by California, then Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, and the median salaries also are kind of in the range of 85 to 90K right there. Now, this is the number I wanted to share with you. The 2020 IT Skills and Salary Report reported the top 10 most widely held certifications worldwide, and the #1 certification was ITIL Foundation, which is a great testimony to the fact that how useful the certification is, not only for individuals, but for everybody, to make their lives easy, their jobs easy, their companies more profitable, and it shows. And that's the reason why people recognize ITIL as a very valuable certification. So if you're not leveraging, even if you're certified and you're not leveraging your ITIL certification for that promotion or for that job, I seriously recommend that go and use your credentials, because your credentials are not something which is, well, you know what, yeah, it's okay to have it. It's not just an okay thing. It's a big value add to the organization if you're ITIL certified. And if you're not, I strongly recommend ask your organization to do it. Now, as we talk about these careers and these jobs and employability, there was a survey, there was a report that Gartner came out with. It's called the CIO Agenda, and they focused on about 1,070 CIOs from about 65 different countries. The total revenue was about $3.5 trillion, and the IT spending for these companies was about $67.5 billion. And they talked about, even in sometimes like the pandemic, how did they really thrive, and what was their goals around a time like the one that we have been in the last several months. So this was a very important report that kind of highlighted that when things are not okay, what are some of your priorities? Because when things are not okay, at that point of time, your priorities become more prominent, and you know what you really want to do. I wanted to share a few things about this report. The first thing was alignment. When you talk about alignment, the organization can stay together, right? While it's moving from let's say, mostly a face-to-face and in-person environment to remotely working for all the employees out there. Everybody, 100% of the teams are online and they're working through that. Alignment really matters a lot as to how these teams are aligned. Adaptability and anticipation were the other things that were important here. And one of the things that really came out well, and the fact that CIOs reported this, was that the statement that you see on the right, that even if the crisis didn't revolve around technology, the solution often is to make the enterprise more deeply and strategically digital. You can have whatsoever sort of issues, but solutions that are digital really impact the way your organization works, and at the same time how your employees perceive the organization. And that's the reason why, if your business leadership is really good, you will see them being very strategically aligned with measures that require the use of IT and related services. Because at the end of the day, an effective solution often has a digital component associated with it. So that is one thing that kind of was very highlighted, that irrespective of this move and all, growing digital with our solutions was very important. Five key capabilities when they talk about that, leadership. So the question was that when the enterprise changes, it really requires people to understand what are those fundamental shifts. And these great leaders, whether it is a CIO, the CTO, or CEOs, whatever the C-suite is, or even mid-level managers, their actions somewhere have to instill that kind of confidence in all the stakeholders. So again, another thing that was required was these digital solutions. Can they help executives make better decisions that can support all the business outcomes? And also the other thing was, see, decision making also has a time component to it. You can sit on a problem for ages and not make a decision, and at the same time leverage the potential of technology to help you make those decisions more effectively. And that's a overlay that was always a question out there, that how do you use technology? Now, just to give an example, so some of the things that we are working on at the moment is, let's say and this is just in the academic setting, a student applies to us. What we do is, in the traditional fashion, the way we do things, we open the file, we look at everything that they've sent, all their documents, all their letters of recommendation, everything, their resume, their statement of purpose, etc. Can I parse all this information through a system that uses something like maybe camera vision, or there are lots of these Google AI packages that can be used that helps figure out, based on the documents that are submitted to me. First, I need to digitize them in case they're not submitted in digital form. But if they are submitted in digital form, can I parse them? Can I have a machine read them and kind of come back to me with a score of whether this person, what's the percentage chance that this person will be admitted in the program? So based on the kind of admissions that I've rolled out in the past, can somebody make that recommendation for me? And what I do is I probably set a threshold where if somebody passes that threshold, if somebody is a 95%, the profile comes out with a 95% score, well, I know this person will eventually make it. I don't have to spend that much time on this application, as opposed to maybe who came back with a 50% score. Now I may have to look at everything very holistically, dig through the documents, and really make that determination whether this person is good or not for my program. So that kind of technology, it's not something which is these days not unspoken of. People talk about leveraging AI, machine learning, and related measures, but in terms of decision making for executives, technology has had a big role in terms of reducing the time it took to make a decision. And that's important. Sometimes time is the most important and most crucial component, because you can make the same decision after that particular time window has passed and it will not have the same effect. Now, when we talk about anticipation, the idea was to take more risk. And the best thing that came out of this was that organizations, the ones that are leaders who are drivers, they don't wait for circumstances to change. Leaders do adapt those, or they understand the emerging trends, and they use that anticipation to make those decisions because they understand how these trends are rolling out. But exactly how these trends will be, or how do you extrapolate it into the future based on your historical data, is something that only a sound system can provide you that kind of insight. So again, we want the leaders to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to anticipating future opportunities, but somewhere the use of technology helps them do that with more confidence. Now, IT has hands down been recognized as a differentiator. Why? Because I just talked about a use case with AI, but AI and RPA, or even traditional automation, has helped reduce the turnaround time for a lot of different challenges that an organization faces. And how do we create these different processes, or different models, or different frameworks, or what needs to be done and what doesn't have to be done? All this is possible because of guidance from things like ITIL that helps you in all circumstances. Pandemic or no pandemic, your organization will have newer challenges, because remember, the consumer landscape is always changing. As the consumer landscape changes, their needs changes. Needs changes, you need new solutions. To provide those solutions, you need ways of doing it. Have your organizations, your stakeholders, your people, your resources structured, and all that guidance comes from things like ITIL. Adaptability. So again, you want to keep the cost down. You want to make sure that you are adapting to change. But one of the things that really helped these CIOs, and it helped because of frameworks. Again, I'm saying ITIL a lot of times, but ITIL is the reason why a lot of these good things happen. And it could be a lot of other frameworks that you may use, but ITIL, when you look at your organization holistically and you want to figure out what are some of the good frameworks to use for my organization, most of the cases ITIL will be a top candidate for you. But then, because one of the recommendations that it always has and always talks about is continuous improvement, these CIOs in some way were able to cultivate that culture that made sure that they were constantly responding to change, and they were making sure that their needs were not overlooked, but their needs and their current operations were kept in sync with one another, so that they have time to innovate, and they again stay ahead of what their consumers want. In fact, technology and good frameworks have helped companies be proactive as opposed to being reactive, because when you are reacting to something, you are risking losing your customers. So again, a good framework like ITIL helps you mitigate that. There was a use case that, and this is something that you can even find on PeopleCert or Axelos's website, that PeopleCert and Axelos came together. PeopleCert bought out Axelos, that owns ITIL, but you can find this on the website as well. But just want to quickly touch upon this. In the city of Pennsylvania, which is the second largest city with a population about 300K, went and used ITIL for better public service provision. Their innovation and performance teams, they were siloed. Their IT personnel were embedded within other departments, and they were using a lot of outdated frameworks and maybe practices. And what was happening was, people who were trying to reach out to these departments for services did not get the level of experience that they had expected. Now, what are these different departments that were impacted by this? There were the city workers. There were about 3,500 of them, and they were spread across City Park, the council, clerk's office, mayor's office, city planning, permits, police, public safety, public works department, ethics, human resources. I mean, you talk about a city, there are tons of departments out there. And for them, really old, outdated methods, frameworks, technologies, everything kind of resulted into a not so good experience for the residents. So what they did was when they implemented ITIL, they had people get trained and they had people get coached and they had people while they were implementing ITIL, of course, there was an oversight, but especially for let's say the IT operations that the city of Pittsburgh was using, they went from being very individual reliant, Joe here knows everything and we'll wait for Joe to come, to being very process and practice based. And that's one thing, if you have somebody who is the center of everything that you do, then it's a high risk situation, because if that person is no longer there, then there's no way that you can fix these problems. So again, being practice based or process based helped them mitigate those issues. And at the same time, there are no bottlenecks that they were seeing previously. They saw that a lot of end users were saying yes more frequently because they could do their stuff. They had transparency across departments, internally and externally. The residents were able to see that change. Internally, they knew what they were working on. There was consistency across the work or the level of service that was being provided to the residents across the different departments. Speaking the same language is important. You can't give different responses to the same question asked by the same person, because that shows that somewhere that flow of knowledge or that flow of information is not the same. We talk about Chinese whispers, where it starts from one end and by the time it reaches the other end, it changes the meaning. And of course, with all these things happening, the services were delivered better, and of course, the perception about services by the city officials grew with people. They were more positive about it. Now, when this was implemented, it definitely exceeded the expectations of their leaders. And this is not something that I've just seen with one place, but every time an organization that doesn't use ITIL principles and goes ahead and implements ITIL, they find a lot of great results that they had not expected. Why? Because what good IT looks like in the absence of a framework like ITIL is not known. So when companies really implement that, they see a lot of great changes that they had never expected. One of the things about this particular case was that ITIL enabled the employees to do a lot of great things out there for the employees. And again, it's not like that you put in new people. It was the same people who were trained differently, and they felt more supported. They felt that they were supporting each other better, and their leadership also was doing a lot of things. And again, ITIL is not about just changing how one person or one department works. You have to look at the whole organization holistically, and then that's when you can just make the organization feel those changes. Again, if you just go to one part of the organization and just change that one part, you might not get the results the way you want. And again, a lot of consistency, collaboration, planning, innovation, continuous improvement is what they looked at. And again, even in COVID-19, despite the way things moved from in-person experience to online, they didn't see a lot of problems with that, because again, the modality had nothing to do with their processes, and their processes were strong enough to wade through these crises. So yeah, a lot of great things that are happening out there in the industry around ITIL. And what I would recommend is, so few things. If you're not ITIL, if you're ITIL aware of ITIL and you're not certified, get certified. If you are certified on anything which is not ITIL4, then get ITIL4 certification. If you're somebody who's not using ITIL at all, I would strongly recommend that try and see how your organization can benefit from it. At the end of the day, a good framework may sometimes look like a lot of work, but don't let that stop your organization from adopting good practices. Again, how do you know it's a lot of work when you have not invested time in it? That's the one question I always ask people who are trying to implement things like ITIL. But one thing that you may also want to do is connect with me. So here's my information on LinkedIn, my email address, my direct phone line. But if you want to connect, I'll be more than happy. And there are a lot of things that we do around ITIL. If you want to connect for the university and you have questions about that, that also is something that I can take up. But Lisa, at this point of time, would you like to get into any discussion, any questions that our audience may have?
I would. Thank you. I got to say that your presentation style is so engaging that you were sort of asking hypothetical questions, and I kept like going to answer them. So I was like, oh, I know that one. So we've got a couple of questions so far, and you guys, feel free to put in any other questions you'd like for us to answer. So let's start off first with Dee's question, which is, what is your recommendation for someone who is ITIL trained but joins a company that does not recognize ITIL? Should one become a champion or look elsewhere?
What a great question. And whosoever asked that question, thank you for asking that question. It may feel, when you are certified and you know the benefits of it and you go and start working at a place where, they don't understand the benefits of it. I think it's a great opportunity for you to introduce ITIL to them. Now, I have been in a situation where there was absolutely no processes, and there was even though people felt that they had everything taken care of, they were missing structure. They were missing these wonderful ways through which they could be much better than what they were doing. I use that as an opportunity to go and show them what really ITIL can do in very small chunks. So you cannot go and make a change to the entire organization if they don't know how to use ITIL. I would say that, yes, go ahead, and that should be the goal, that they should not stop until the entire organization is covered, but just to pilot out something. Figure out if there is a place that you feel really can benefit from ITIL, maybe a small section. It could be a department, it could be a few people, and try to implement just some test practices to see how they're doing. Now, this is not something you can do overnight. It will take a few weeks, it can take a few months, and that's exactly what I did at this place where I was put there. And even though they were using incident management, problem management, change management, they were missing all the principles. They were using it as glorified tools rather than as processes and practices. So it took about a year, but they saw the benefits and they saw the change in the customers' perception about them. And I think it was a great opportunity for me to not only introduce something which is valuable, but at the same time establish myself as somebody who can bring in value. And I think that might be your opportunity to show that you're valuable beyond just the scope of work for which you are hired. I mean, it helped me in my career, and I'm sure that as well. What you might want to see is you might want to get a couple of your leaders, their buy-in, because you always need that kind of support. I mean, in my case, I did have a leadership buy-in, and they were kind of convinced that this will work. But to convince them as well, it's not like I told them, hey, let's use ITIL, and they're like, oh yeah, we know everything about ITIL, let's do it. I had to spend some time to tell them what ITIL can do, how the absence of ITIL is affecting the organization, and what the presence can do. And ask them to give me, a X number of days or X number of weeks. It was a few weeks that I asked them, and just told them, let me show you the difference here. Now, was there pushback internally? Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, because I am so used to doing stuff in a certain way, and why do you want me to change? But people changed when their consumers, their customers started telling them, oh, this is so much better. Oh, I like this. I like that. And that became a motivation for my team to now say, oh, you know what? This works better. Let's do it more. When 3 people started doing it, 3 people, everybody else saw what they were doing. Now they also wanted to do it. Success speaks for itself. So rather than just going out and telling 100 employees out there that, hey, all of us have to be ITIL compliant, go start with a small unit. Let them be your champion. You champion the cause with a small group and let the small group then further champion it. But I would say if I was in your place, I would take this opportunity hands down to make this change. And another thing is there, and I don't want to step in on any toes or anything here. Maybe at the end of it, you will realize that maybe there's not that acceptance that you're looking for. At that point of time, you may want to ask why, because just because you have a great idea and it's not getting accepted doesn't mean that people don't care. Maybe they're not seeing it the way you are seeing it. So it might take some time, but trust me, the minute you have one person who's ready to back you, that's all you need.
Well, and to that end, to help people see it the way you're seeing it, I threw in the chat a link to our ROI calculator. It's just a really simple Excel spreadsheet that helps you walk through picking some low-hanging fruit. If you can get a little bit of buy-in to do a pilot, if anything that you can prove return on investment, and at some point I'm going to update this to return on value even. But it's just a simple worksheet that allows you to put in, like on the incident tab, how many incidents you guys are processing, and you can show proof of concept of, if we were doing this better and just in this rudimentary way, here's the money that we would be saving. So that might help as well. The next question is is PMP considered in that ranking? And I'm not sure, Cesar, I think that was back on the, do you know which slide it was?
I know which slide you're talking about.
Can you go back to that slide?
I am going. You're talking about the top skills?
Number of certificates. Thank you for that follow-up, Cesar.
So, okay, so in terms of the skills that they required, after ITIL, the next one was project management. But they didn't specifically say PMP or CAPM or any of the other certifications, but they just mentioned project management.
So, Gaurav, then I have a follow-up question to that. Yes. As you know, Axelos in their portfolio, they also own Prince2, and Prince2 is sort of the moniker here in the United States is it's the UK version of PMI. Yes. I think it's a lot different than that, but I keep hearing that Prince2 is finally really kind of crossing the pond, and they're getting a lot more traction. We do have, particularly the large organizations that we work with are starting to at least show kind of some interest and ask some questions. What about in your world? Are you hearing or seeing any more about Prince2 that, let me clarify, isn't coming from Axelos and PeopleCert?
Well, I'll give a two-prong answer to this. The first one is, yes, it is kind of crossing the pond, and it is slowly and slowly getting that recognition as something that, oh, it's not a US thing, that's in the UK. I've heard a lot of people say that that's in the UK kind of a thing. But a lot of these organizations, as they are growing, and even with their, the way their employees are structured around the world, I think that's one of the reasons why the organizations in the US are kind of taking notice of Prince2 as a viable certification, because they have all these cross-functional teams that are located all over the place. And we have just had more and more of these teams get spread out, and COVID technically showed us how we can work around the globe. So I would say that there is a big push because of COVID onto things like Prince2 and all here in the US. At the same time, I'm also seeing Axelos and PeopleCert trying to build that portfolio within the United States so that there are more and more people who are Prince2 certified. So if you see an opportunity to get that, I would say you are kind of riding that early wave of people to certified. So do not miss out on that. If it's anywhere on your radar, just do it.
So this is really interesting. And Caesar, thank you so much for sending this in. He just Googled that 2 million people are ITIL certified versus only 1 million, I mean only, but 1 million people PMP certified. And he says that was surprising to me. Yes, sir, that's surprising to me as well. It's a very interesting stat. Thank you for sharing that with us. And then
can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
So that actually is not surprising to me. And the reason why I say that is I'm saying it from the standpoint of the effort that one has to put in to get PMP as opposed to ITIL. Now, not it's apples and oranges, but I'll still say that because of the significant amount of effort that is required for PMP, that can sometimes be a detractor.
You know what? That's a really good point, because if you were to compare PMP to, say, ITIL expert or even V2 service manager, yeah, yep, you're right.
And when we say ITIL, most of the companies, when they say, oh, I want somebody who's ITIL certified, they generally don't say expert or master or anything. Most of the times they're okay with ITIL4 foundation. So it's like this. If you think of ITIL, think of it as a generalist certification. Irrespective of what role you're playing in the organization, you will still find value with this. Whereas project management is, a specialized set of people who are just working in the project management space. A lot of times, now, despite the fact that it's a lot of prep to get a PMP, you see that big number of 1 million, and that is there because companies want to project their project managers as certified, which also results into, higher revenues. So that's the reason why you see a lot of people still, despite the fact that this is a much tougher exam to pass, you will see them certified because of the portfolio that the company is building with certified professionals.
Well, and also I think that obviously we know that PMP certification is not specific to information technology professionals. That's where right. There is a small subset of individuals who don't actually work in IT that are foundation or even more certified, but it's I don't know what the percentage is, just going through my own sort of empirical data. It is yeah, there's a big difference in that number there as well. Yeah. So we ready for the next question?
Sure, yes, absolutely.
So I recently became certified in V4. My organization we consider ourselves an ITIL shop, but we are now sort of calling ourselves an ITIL V3 shop, which I wish they weren't doing. How do I, what's my low-hanging fruit for getting our organization to see the big differences between 3 and 4 and the value that I'm putting in some of these words here, but the value that a very modern ITIL4 shop looks like compared to a V3 shop. So what's some just quick low-hanging fruits that we can give Lee?
Well, again, the number one thing that you might want to do is see with your organization how your people are working, who they are, first of all, in their roles. Who are your internal and external stakeholders? Do you have any partners or suppliers? Looking at what are the technology that you're using for the different processes that are in place, and then trying to reevaluate everybody's role. So what I would do is, all of us create roadmaps. At the start of the year, we have a roadmap. These are our goals for the year, and this is what we want to achieve. Put those goals in front of yourself and then relook at your employees, your partners, and the technology that you're using for those processes, and try to figure out if those goals can be achieved with what you have. If the answer is yes, then is it in the same time frame that you expect it to be achieved? If the answer again is yes, then there's a problem. Why? Because if you come out with a 12-month plan and it can be delivered with your things in exactly 12 months, then you're nowhere leaving any buffer for any unwarranted situations that may arise.
Unplanned work or fun new improvements that in May we realize, oh goodness, yeah.
Exactly. And they always say that, not they, but the general thing is 20 to 30%, if that is the buffer that you can give yourself and then plan, that's always the best scenario. Now, I'm sure that when people started planning for, let's say, a year, and I'll be honest, I was leading the North Texas district of Toastmasters, 4,000 people, lots of people who were working with me, about 100 plus chairs and officers, and several thousands of officers as well. And this was the year 2019 and 2020. We start on July 1st and we end on June 30th. Guess what happened between this time? Right at the middle of the year, we had the pandemic, and we had to rework every possible thing that we had to work on. If we did not have the right tools in place, processes in place, and that buffer to kind of recover from a shock, we wouldn't have done it. So I think that buffer is important. And every time you have to give yourself that buffer and then relook at your processes, because I can assure you a process that has worked for you in the past may not work the same way in the future, because the consumer that you're catering to has changed. So when that consumer has changed, how can we expect the same processes and the same ways of working to help? At the same time, leverage the power of digital tools, which are around AI and machine learning or RPA, process automation and all, because all these are not job snatchers. These are not job killers. These are job emulsifiers.
Enhancers.
It helps you do your job better.
Yeah.
So see where you can use that.
Gaurav, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second because we're right at the top of the hour, and I just want to say to the folks that have to drop, hey, thank you very much for being here with us today. It looks like we're gonna do a December webinar, which we've been delivering monthly webinars for 15 years, and we don't typically do December. I'm pretty excited because we're working on a panel of IT practitioners who are working on digital employee experience programs, and we're going to have one of the tool players in the space who really are considered experts at employee experience. So we're working to get that together. Very likely will happen in December. You guys will all be getting an invite for that. And on your way out, there is a very short 1 or 2 question survey. And one of the questions is, what other topics would you like for us to cover? We really do create our plan for the year based on what you guys who are coming say that you'd like to hear from us. So please be sure to fill that out on your way out. And then we do have one more question. So if it's all right with you, it is, oh my goodness, it disappeared. I've got to figure out how to pull that back up. But I will say this, I read a statistic recently that said Gartner said that 65% of organizations enhance their digital transformation program because of the pandemic. But I think that, I don't know, I didn't have a chance to dig into what the criteria was for them to base that on, but I think it's way higher than 65%. I mean, I think that every organization that is still in business today has made some adjustments, and maybe that doesn't all fall under the Gartner terminology of digital transformation, but I think that it makes it very interesting in that ITIL4 being introduced in 2019, pretty close to the start of the pandemic, and all of the great guidance around modernization and digitalization and value. I think we'd be in a really different place in terms of, I know that a lot of organizations are using that knowledge already to continue to improve their DT programs. And I'm just, sometimes I wonder, gosh, if we wouldn't have gotten ITIL4 out the door before the pandemic, what would it look like? And I said all of that, Gaurav, because the question was something around that, but the person left and the question left with them. So, but thoughts and comments on that before we go.
Well, I definitely agree that ITIL's guidance really helped a lot of organizations. But another thing that the pandemic did was, the pandemic really shook up the industry. to really look at what their priorities were and how to keep things rolling. We talk about things like disaster recovery, we talk about business continuity, but we don't really know how it works until we are in a situation. It's like, you have airbags, your car has airbags, but you don't know if they work, right? If I ask you, do they work? There's no way for you to check. And that's where good frameworks help you deliver products and services in a way that you don't have to really be always questioning the fact whether those airbags will work or not. It will, because they've been designed using a good process. Every organization saw some kind of change, and that change was required because, again, the way we do business changed. How it was a stigma in the past about working remotely or that you will not be productive. And the entire world was working online at a point of time, and we still were productive. Or we may have, barking pets next to us, or maybe children who need more hand-holding, which is fine, but we were still able to do it. The need for digital content went through the sky. And yes, we talk about, oh, let's watch a movie and we are all home and let's do this and that. But think about companies who are delivering this technology to you. For them, the need of their customers changed, so they had to rapidly move. But you're right, every organization in some shape or form had to change the way they were doing things. And I would say practice is not needed, or things that are mediocre and don't get value, they were highlighted. And we figured out this is what we don't need. And I think rather than what we need, we figured out what we don't need, and that was a big win in this. And of course, the recommendation of frameworks like ITIL helped. So
yeah,
I see a big win.
Yeah, I know that a lot of our clients and industry friends have said to us that one of the silver linings, because I like to talk a lot about silver linings from this pandemic that we're emerging from, but definitely silver linings was for them. They realized how much inefficient process they were automating that they didn't even need. And so, in the first couple of months, waves, it was really getting the tools in the hands of the remote workforce. But then a lot of organizations have already started to have an opportunity to look back and say, wow, that was rough. I mean, of course, it was rough. We just transitioned, whether it was 5 or 500,000 employees to be able to work from home, but forcing it to happen that way then forced them to review, why was that so hard? Where did we fall down? Yeah. And so a lot of the folks that I talk with feel like they're emerging weirdly in a lot of ways in a better place than where they were prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
So, well, it looks like we don't have, of course, I could sit here and talk to you all day, but it looks like we don't have any other questions. So thank you so much. What an interesting, we've never had this kind of webinar before. And I, long time ago, 120 years ago, I actually came up and running a technical staffing and consulting company. So this was all, and I am such a fan in higher ed. So this is just all so near and dear to my heart. I thought that it was really interesting. And I hope those of you that were able to join us really got a lot out of it, because we always want to give you a lot of value in this 1 hour. So thanks again, and we shall talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and all the best, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving. You too. Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.